Okay, we're continuing our coverage of the London system, so against London. And I want to show you now some lines if white allows us um, to capture the bishop on f4 when it comes to f4. So bishop f4, e6, we're talking again about the line with e6 and c5 later. So e3, c5, c3. This is very likely to happen, and after knight c6, knight f3. Here, my recommendation was to go bishop e7. So we are trying to win this bishop here. White might play h2, h3, but in that case we can switch the direction of the attack on this bishop and go d5, bishop d6, and then challenge it this way. After bishop d3, we can actually play knight h5, and now the line I want to cover is if white here plays d takes c5. So not many players will do that, but I think it's still important to know how to play it. So obviously you take the pawn here. You can't allow white to cover it. And after, let's say, castles, first I recommend to you to play queen c7 to force a concession from white in the form of g3. If f5, we have a very strong move, g6, kind of a double attack on this pawn. So we force it to take before the white pieces are out. And after rook e1, we're back the bishop. After f takes, we take here with the e pawn. And I think this position is more or less equal. Yeah. So instead, white will probably cover it with g3. And after this, it's very important that you play with b6 and later bishop b7 IDs. You need some play here, since white has the idea probably of going knight e2, b4, maybe bring the rook in with rook c1, push the c pawn, maybe push the a pawn forward. So that's why b6. And after, let's say, knight d2, we castle bishop b7, I think, was also possible. And after rook c1, bishop b7. Let's say white wants to get this battery here, sorry, on this diagonal. So then we can actually play knight e7. We open the diagonal for the bishop, and when the queen comes to c2, we are playing f5. So please remember this structure. We are kind of in some kind of strange Dutch defense structure. The point is that we are blocking white, the diagonal for white, also preventing pawn pushes, and we have good control over these line squares here, and some ideas connected with queen c6, playing against this knight, and maybe if we get lucky, some mating ideas. Instead, let's see some other lines. So let's say queen e2, bishop b7 again, and after knight d2, you can play a5 here. The point is you want to stop b4. And if white plays b4, so if white thinks, well, I need to play b4 now, otherwise maybe black will counter it. In that case, you can go bishop e7, and after knight d2, just castle. And after b5, remember that b5 isn't too dangerous here. In this case, we go back to d8. And after rook c1, again we set up this pawn chain, and white doesn't have enough attackers to go through with c4, c5. Usually we can just retake with the b pawn, and if we insist by going, for example, a4, then we can play rook c8, putting some pressure of our own. Let's say knight b3, bringing the knight in, supporting a5. Then we can play bishop a8, a5, queen b7. You see we created the battery here. And after, let's say, knight e2, takes, we can play bishop c5. Let's say something like h3, knight f7. If white insists on pushing, we can just take this here and go after the weak pawn here. And let's see, here you notice that the f2 pawn is weak, which was one advantage of putting the pawn on, putting the bishop on f5. Also, let's say white plays rook c to a1, then we have bishop b6. So let's take a look at another line. Let's say white plays rook to e1. Again, bishop b7, queen e2, more or less the same thing. a5 to prevent b4. And after knight c2, castles, queen e4, again creating this battery. g6. I was wondering why f5. Well, f5 I think should be fine here also. But the engine somehow liked g6 better. After queen e2, well, we were threatening some discovered attacks here. After queen e2, knight e7. Let's say white goes h4 to maybe try h4, h5 ideas. So knight to f5. We are threatening now. Knight to g3 with a tempo on the queen, and this pawn is pinned. That's why king g2. Here the engine has, I think, knight 8 takes h4 ideas, but I think even better here, and also an interesting idea to keep in mind is to play a4 and push this pawn all the way here to a3, undermining the solidity of this pawn chain here. So h5. Here tactically we can actually just take the pawn, and after, let's say, rook to h1 and g7. You see here, let's show a sample line if white insists on doubling on the h file. So here we just pick up all of the pawns, and in the end white is left with no attack at all. Still, you need to be somewhat careful with the open file here, and maybe some ideas by white to bring the queen to this diagonal. But that will take him a lot of time, and in the meantime we have play of our own. So let's say here king g8, let's say queen c1. So here we can just cover it with f6, and this should be fine for us. What you do want to avoid, let's say if you just play something like castles, b4, bishop e7, let's just play some normal moves. What you do want to avoid is that you get into trouble here with this queen here on the c file. Oh, sorry. Let's say white will push b5 and insist on putting some pressure. So here you have to be careful not to give white too easy play. you can see that this queen here is vulnerable here on this square. Also, once the d pawn disappears, you might have some trouble with these bishops. So even though it's still equal here, it's still white is gaining some initiative. That's why I recommend you here to start with queen c7 to force a concession of g3, and after that to play the move b6, which avoids most of the stuff I've shown you. So if white wants to play b4 here, then you've seen that it's not so dangerous. One thing white can try is here play bishop a6 to try to eliminate your, but here you can just take it, and after the queen comes to a6 you castle. White will probably play something like knight to d2, after which I recommend you to drop the bishop back to e7. White will probably have some plans to play with its queenside pawns, and we want to be able to put the bishop on this diagonal here. So b4, for example, d5, rook c1, bishop f6, and if white is too ambitious, he might even get into trouble. Let's say a4, rook c8, b5, and here you can see that white trapped his own queen. Probably won't happen. Won't happen to you. Won't happen. But just to show that, well, we still have good play. Notice that after b4, after white takes plays b4, this pawn becomes backwards and weak. And once we move the queen out of the way of the c-file, we can put our rooks here and play against, try to play against this pawn here. So in summary, with this variation where white allows you to take the bishop on f4, plays d takes c5, you can just safely take out the bishop. But please keep in mind white's ideas, bringing these pieces out and playing on the queen side. Maybe also finally bring this knight to e5 or d4 at some point. Some ideas with targeting this pawn on h7. So I recommend that first you play queen c7 to force white to play g3, open up this diagonal. Then we play b6, put the bishop on, b7. Once in a while, bishop a6 might be interesting as well. And here, and here, after castles, let's say b4, bishop e7, rook c1, you know the drill. Let's say, of course this is hanging now, so let's say a3, let's say white plays a3, then you can play, I think a5 is fine, b5 is not so good for white. Here also don't forget that you can play something like this. So white is preparing probably to push forward. And here you can play bishop a7 and c4 and make a battery with the knight and the bishop again. Also keep in mind the idea of closing the position with f5 and getting more control over these light squares here. So that's it for today. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe or leave a comment, and I will see you maybe in one of the next ones.